Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of Cannabinoids. I'm David. I have Rachel.
Hello.
That makes us Cannabinoids. And we actually have another special guest today, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And his name is Milos. So Milos is a medical cannabis researcher who merges neuroscience with cultivation and extraction methodologies. He is currently developing a database that pairs Chemovars to specific medical use cases. And all the way from Melbourne, Australia, Milos.
Hi, David. Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Always happy to contribute to the medical cannabis community.
I got Milos, and I was trying, Rachel and I were trying to go over how to pronounce your last name correctly. And if you're a listener to the show, you know I don't pronounce things correctly at all.
Yes, understatement.
So it's Vojvodic?
It's very close, actually. Vojvodic.
Vojvodic. Oh, that makes more sense. I'm putting the wrong emphasis on the syllables there. So thank you for being
You've done well. You've done well.
We'll just kick this right off the bat. Milos, I just wanted to get your view in explaining the differences between Chemovars versus Cultivars and referring specifically to cannabis.
Sure, David. A cultivar is a group of plants selected for desirable physical characteristics that are generally maintained throughout the life cycle and passed on to the next generation. So when we use the term cultivar, we are generally referring to plants that have been bred and cultivated in such a way that brings out and preserves characteristics to meet specific business objectives such as disease and pest resistance, rate of development, or yield per square meter. So when breeding chemical varieties or chemovars, we take the previously mentioned characteristics into account, but we redirect our focus towards breeding, preserving plants that yield a desirable chemical profile of cannabinoids, terpenoids, and flavonoids. So that's the key difference there.
Okay, so we hear a lot about, indica effects versus sativa effects, like the old Inda couch when they're describing indica. And so how, if at all, how does that hold up as a description?
And specifically when talking about Chemovars and Cultivars, what does indica and sativa have to do with that?
Yeah, that's actually a great follow-up question to address a very common misconception. So people generally associate indica cultivars with sedating psychoactive effects and sativa cultivars with uplifting effects, as you've just mentioned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Since we've been able to legally study cannabis, we've come to realize that this nomenclature only holds true when describing the physical characteristics of the plant. So it's still true that sativa generally grows taller with narrow leaves and the indica grows shorter with broader leaves. However, some sativa varieties tend to produce a chemical profile that actually causes sedating psychoactive effects, and some indica varieties tend to produce a profile that causes uplifting effects. So this is why it's so important to focus on breeding chemovars as opposed to breeding cultivars within the domain of medical cannabis cultivation.
There's this theory, the entourage effect, and basically, for those of us who don't know, it's basically you have one cannabinoid, you have one terpene, they have their specific functions, but when you put them together, the theory is that 1 + 1 = 5. There's more benefits that come out of different natural
acting together.
Yeah, natural compounds acting together. So what research have you found in mapping those chemovars based on cannabinoid and terpene profiles to support the theory?
Okay, so I think we can start by breaking this into two parts. So the fact that some cannabis compounds can amplify the effects of others is actually a proven fact. So, for example, myrcene and THC are both sedating on their own.
Okay.
But when combined, they can produce a stronger sedating effect at a lower dose.
Okay.
Another example is Epidiolex. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's a 97% pure CBD formulation.
Yep.
That works for treating rare types of epilepsy. Yeah. So Epidiolex is generally effective at doses of 2,500 milligrams.
Ooh.
Yeah,
That's quite a lot.
That's the issue. Yeah, that's the issue with it. So people that are really suffering can sometimes be paying up to $30,000-$40,000 a year just to have this treatment.
Right. It is not cheap.
No.
So when you compare this to a whole plant CBD extract, studies have shown that the plant can produce the same results at only a fifth of the dose.
Okay.
So it's a big difference there.
So because it's using the other compounds, in conjunction and...
Yeah, so this is a whole plant extract versus Epidiolex, which is almost purely CBD.
Okay. So it seems like it makes the smaller amounts of CBD more effective to have the other compounds with it.
That's exactly right.
Cool.
So the part of this theory that is still a theory is that you need every single compound within the plant to achieve these synergistic. So there is now good evidence to support the notion that one or two plant-derived isolates are not able to replicate the cancer-killing effects seen in certain chemovars. Mm-hmm. But a combination of 3 plant-derived isolates working in synergy has been successful at doing just that in vitro studies conducted by David Mieri and his team in Israel.
Okay. So what does psychoactive mean? So the industry describes CBD as a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, but understanding cannabinoids interacting with the CB1 receptors that directly affect the central nervous system, wouldn't CBD be considered psychoactive in that?
Yeah, so let's start with the definition of psychoactive. Psychoactive substance changes brain functions and results in alterations in perception, mood, consciousness.
Right. Okay.
So CBD does not actually directly bind to CB1, but it does occupy transporter proteins that facilitate the breakdown of the endocannabinoid anandamide.
Okay.
Now, anandamide is very psychoactive, and CBD changes the neural processes that lead to an increased concentration of this psychoactive endocannabinoid. So to answer your question, yes, CBD is definitely psychoactive, but there is little to no intoxicating effects. So this is where the confusion stems from, I think.
We've been trying to figure that out for a while too. Everyone says it's not psychoactive, and we want to make sure we're correct when we respond.
Yeah, right. Because, CB1 receptors directly are responding to, or they're in the central nervous system, which, the brain is the central nervous system.
Right.
So if you're altering anything CB1 receptors in their central nervous, of course it's going to be psychoactive.
Exactly right. Exactly.
That's what I always thought. So thank you for clearing that up. Can we right now cultivate a plant to directly yield the profiles we want when getting a certain kind of extract, or even as a plant? Yeah.
So yes, we can, but it's very difficult. It takes many iterations of strict cultivation, breeding, and laboratory analysis. This can range from anywhere from 6 months to 3 or more years in some cases to achieve a profile that we desire.
Okay.
Wow. All right. So it takes a while. It takes a lot of patience involved with that.
Yeah. And there's no guarantee at the end that you will achieve it. It is achievable, but there are so many variables when cultivating, and it's a living organism. So you never know what to expect, how it's going to adapt to certain environments, certain nutrients, or there's so much to it. Yeah.
I can imagine something like, not as much sunlight, or a little bit of temperature variation, or even humidity. The soil, humidity, all those things that we can't really control, finite, so I could totally see how it would just take a long time
to get it.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's right. All of these factors can actually change the profile at the end. So we can control them very closely, but no one wants to say that your power won't go out for a few days.
Right.
Or, something like that can happen.
Can we yield a specific profile in the plant with current technology, with different extraction methods, being it CO2, ethanol, alcohol, whatever you have.
Yeah, I'm really interested in this one.
Yeah, can we actually yield specifics?
Okay, so this is where we have much more control. So we can actually isolate individual cannabinoids and terpenoids and then recombine them to create custom formulations with the technology available today. And we can do this repeatedly.
So is that similar with terpenes in extraction? Is it possible to preserve the terpenes even throughout the extraction methods?
Okay, so it's never possible to preserve 100% of the terpenes, because even if you have a flower and you can smell it, the fact that you're smelling it means that some of the terpenes are...
Okay.
It is possible to preserve a very high percentage of terpenes with the right methods and tools, such as vacuum freeze dryers, subcritical CO2 runs, and custom condensed vapor extractors.
Okay.
No, that's so. With Rachel and I were discussing the vacuum freeze dryers and how that preserves terpenes.
Well, that was like the live resin. We've been getting into like live resins a bit more.
Yeah.
And so I was reading that it was because it was frozen as soon as it was cut. So it was frozen from fresh and then extracted from fresh, in essence. So that helps preserve more, you think?
So there is something, definitely, something called fresh frozen, where you literally you cut the plant and you snap freeze it, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be taken to an extraction artist who can then extract a live resin. Yeah, with this method, you're able to preserve a lot more of the more delicate terpenes.
Yeah. And the flavors and
the flavors as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is really, really good for a smaller craft extraction methods.
Okay.
But if you want to take it to a large scale or for the medical industry, it's very difficult to create a viable standard operating procedure to allow for that.
Okay.
So what's the percentage that you would say, the percentage of terpenes that are preserved when flash freezing as opposed to just going right into the CO2 extraction?
It depends on a lot of different variables. So it depends how long it's been sitting there, the temperature, there's so much more to it, and how skilled the extracting artist is. But honestly, I wouldn't be able to give you an exact percentage.
Right.
Because there's just way too many variables. If it was in a controlled environment where I could actually take into account all the variables, I could tell you, but just off the top of my head, I would be guessing. So.
No, I get it. We were talking to another extraction expert. What I got out of it was there are a lot of variables. There's just so many. You can't really get exactly what you want at the end saying what I want at the beginning, because there's just so many different variables, and we were talking about that already. So
and you were saying how important it was to find out the chain, is it harvested here and then transported here, or
Well, that's exactly
okay.
Right. So if you have all that information, then you can sit down and work it out.
Yeah. Or you could just see what works best for you.
So Milos, what are you currently working on right now?
Okay, David. Currently, I'm working on roadmaps for producing safe and effective cannabinoid-based medicine and a database for matching Chemovars to medical use cases. So this is, of course, a big endeavor to undertake. It requires an understanding of the endocannabinoid system, Chemovar cultivation, cannabis extraction, and I found that medical cannabis companies have come to appreciate the benefits of taking a research-based approach to the IP development. And this is one way that I've been able to add value to the upcoming industry here in Australia as an independent contractor.
So how can people find you then to find out more?
So I think the best way to find me is just via LinkedIn.
Okay, yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes for that. So speaking of that, how can we and our listeners help support you and the work that you're doing with this, what we've just been talking about?
I think the best way people can support me is by making more lab data freely available or introducing me to more people that have access to it.
if you could say one thing to wrap up everything we've talked about and enlighten the audience with misconceptions or misinformation that you see today in the industry, what would it be?
I would say focus on what's inside the plant that you're cultivating before planning on how much of it you could produce.
So quality over quantity, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, if you're developing a medical formulation targeted at a medical condition, you could grow as much of a certain cultivar as you like, but if it's not matched to a specific use case in a medical context, it's sort of wasted. So a lot of people go for that, what's my profit going to be, without figuring out, well, what are they going to treat and what kind of compounds will they grow in their chemicals that they can either extract or they can be beneficial as either a dry flower smoke product, full spectrum extract, or isolates that can be derived from that product.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited to see as more of this Chemovar research comes out and we can, get more accurate results on what we're intaking, and just I feel like it would so much more pinpoint what we're trying to get to, what we're trying to help heal and, remedy. So
absolutely,
I think it'll be awesome.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, thank you so much, Milos. I really appreciate you coming on to enlighten us with that wonderful Australian accent of yours.
Yes, and working with the time zones, too.
You are kind of leading the way to find specific plant varieties that will help with certain ailments.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Rachel.